The United States will fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows, as we do all around the world. Finally, with its actions in the South China Sea, China is out of step with both international norms that underscore the Asia-Pacific security architecture and the regional consensus in favor of a non-coercive approach to this and other long-standing disputes.
We urge the United States to think carefully before taking actions and take a responsible attitude and stop all provocative words and actions so that it can truly play a constructive role for the peace and stability in the region.
Well, tension is building between the U.S. and China, this time over a series of man-made islands about 800 miles off the coast of China in the South China Sea. And there you see them, this string of islands built up in recent months. And just this week, 2 lighthouses on these new islands. They had a ceremony in which they celebrated these lighthouses. Well, there's evidence that there are military bases being built on these islands, and it's a big problem for the U.S. because 1/3 of all the world's commerce goes through this area. Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard, A.B. Stoddard, associate editor of The Hill, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Okay, Charles.
Well, the Chinese aren't reckless like the Russians, like a Putin. They're not going to go invading places. What they're doing is creating Chinese territory in the middle of a sea that doesn't belong to them and on waters that is claimed by many of the neighbors in the region. But they are doing it because they sense that they can probe the United States under this administration because it has shown that it doesn't stand up. It makes a red line with Syria and it backs down. It tells the Russians there'll be terrible consequences if you absorb and annex Crimea or if you make trouble in eastern Ukraine. The Russians go ahead and do all of that. And what happens just a week ago, our Secretary of State bends a knee in Sochi on a trip to see Tsar Putin, in which we say if you don't do any further aggression, we will relax sanctions, a reversal of the policy that we had had up until now. So they see all that, and they think that they can challenge. I don't think we are near any conflict, but the Chinese are building inexorably their defenses. 10% increase every year for the last 20 years while we are shrinking ours. And their objective is to deny us access to the Pacific Rim waters that we have dominated since the Second World War. And that's aggressive, but they will do it slowly over time.
And AB, I mean, they're even talking about the air rights over these areas in the South China Sea and, you know, controlling that even for U.S. aircraft.
The proclamation in the state press in Chinese telling the people, the government, that war is inevitable and that they are shifting their military focus from defense to offense is not subtle. And I think Charles is right. That's probably their ultimate goal. And like Putin, they'll creep and inch their way there. They're doing this obviously to intimidate and project power, but it's probably because of a weak Asian pivot that they were able to plan this and execute it, and it's very shrewd. What is interesting is I thought that Carter's remarks were strong. We've heard from Vice President Biden. We're running some air surveillance and reacting somewhat with strong words about how Carter said we remain the principal security power in the region for decades to come. But it's not very clear what the U.S. will actually do to slow or stop it, and that's really going to be what the Chinese are banking on.
Here's President Obama back in April talking about some of these tensions.
I don't want to minimize, though, the fact that there are some real tensions that have arisen with China around its approach to maritime issues and its claims. And we've said to China what we would say to any country in that circumstance. That's the wrong way to go about it. And we will continue to work with all countries in the region, starting with our treaty allies, to make sure that basic international norms continue to be observed.
I mean, all this, as Charles mentioned, Steve, is double-digit defense spending increases, a focus on the sea, not the land, and it seems like it's catching a lot of people's attention.
Yeah, well, look, they're expanding where they can. I mean, China has islands that are some 1,000 miles off of the coast of China, and what they're trying to do here is build bridges to those lands to expand their military reach. I think it's very clear what they're doing. The Obama administration has, in a sense, given people a green light to do this. Charles is right that they're doing it in a much more sophisticated way than, say, Vladimir Putin and Russia. And to be fair to the Chinese, a lot of what they've done to this point has been with disputed islands with many different claimants. What I think makes this different in particular is that this was these were Philippine-controlled islands, and they are now doing something that I think could be argued violates the UN law of the Sea Treaty, and that seems to be an escalation to me. And the second point, I think, also refers back to what AB said. You have the Chinese Foreign Ministry admitting that they're doing this for defense and military purposes. I mean, for a while there was at least the pretense that they were doing this for marine research and these sort of benign reasons. Now they're basically owning it and saying, no, 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 we're doing this because we want to expand our reach. I think it's dangerous. I think if you're the Chinese, you have to be looking at Washington and saying, President Obama's in office for 20 months. We've got to do what we can do while we can do it.
These areas are rich in oil and gas. There's a lot of commerce, as I mentioned, that goes through there. Charles, we're not even talking about Taiwan yet and what China may have on the horizon in regards to Taiwan.
Well, Taiwan is, it's been an issue for 50 years, and the Chinese have not acted like the Russians in Ukraine. If they had wanted years ago, even going to the Eisenhower administration, they could have attacked. They would have probably succeeded on the ground, but caused a war with the United States because of our guarantee. They're very careful about that. And I think the Chinese expect that they will absorb Taiwan the way they absorbed Hong Kong, eventually, with the absence of a war. But what they have explicitly said in the paper that was released on Tuesday by the equivalent of their cabinet is their navy is not for the defense of the coast as it used to be. It is for the seizure and the projection of their power onto the seas, which means only one thing. Since America has controlled them since the Second World War, it means denying us access and our control of those seas. They're very open about this. AB says, what can we do? We can start by stopping to shrink our Navy into disappearance. The Chinese are constructing, they're building, developing missiles, anti-ship, new aircraft carriers, and we are shrinking our forces every year. And unless, look, what Reagan did with the buildup had a huge effect on deterring the Russians, we ought to consider at least stopping the shrinking of our forces.
AB, you mentioned the administration's supposed pivot to Asia. There was the reset with Russia and the pivot to Asia. It doesn't seem like, with China holds a lot of U.S. debt. It plays an integral role in North Korea and taming down that country and its ambitions. But it doesn't seem like it's acting as a pivoted nation that the U.S. is paying attention to.
It's actually opening up numerous significant economic opportunities with our allies that we're not involved in. It's not a part of TPP. We obviously skirmish with the Chinese constantly over Iran. This is an accomplishment. What we're talking about tonight for the Chinese. And I didn't say what can we do, I meant it's not clear what they will do. And if Steve is right, then they have 20 months to do whatever they want to do.
Well, and if you look at what Charles says, I think Charles is exactly right prescriptively. That's what we should be doing. There's zero chance that President Obama is going to reverse himself and engage in a defense buildup now. And that, I think, is what is such a scary prospect when you look at the kinds of things that the United States is going to have to be doing 5, 10, 20 years down the road to push this back.